Ah, Vulcan engine, a truly wonderful masterpiece. If only it wasn't 30 files big, suffering from tech debt, and maintained by some random noob who has no idea what a VK enumerate device extension properties is. Luckily, I had a plan. You see, when I first laid eyes on RGFW, I realized something. If a project like GLFW could have a single header lightweight equivalent, why couldn't a simple graphics abstraction library be the same? Because I suck at programming. Luckily, in the creation of this engine, I've accumulated weeks of suffering, like Vulkan not rendering, vertices not positioning, figuring out how the Linux kernel works, getting text to render, switching to RGFW, and adding Mac support. It only took 5 days for me to figure out how to get this modular engine down to single header, but just no-lifing myself through the compiler errors, linking errors, and runtime errors wasn't the end of it. Having a single-header engine really allowed me to see how bad the code really was. I deleted a bunch of the structs and made them pure functions. I removed all references to different parts of the engine, as it's now all in the same file. I overhauled and optimized the API to make it more friendly, as well as being lighter on the stack. I restructured it to make it more readable and inline the functions that were only called once, to avoid too many abstractions, making the code less readable. When you close the window, it now finally deallocates all the memory and closes without crashing. I also fixed hundreds of warnings throughout the engine, to the point where even if you have -w all and -w extra on Linux, you won't see a single warning. Instead of sprites having set text function to make them look like text, they now have a set texture function, which you can take an input from the create text function, which was moved to ctext.hpp and optimized. After a few months of focusing on making my engine usable and making cool stuff to show off in my videos, it was finally time to focus on optimization. Technically, upgrading from GLFW to RGFW gave me an extra 50 to 70% better performance. That was technically only a change to have as little DLLs running alongside the program as possible. I locked in for a day, made window resizing feel smoother on lower-end devices, and increased rendering performance by roughly 10% on lower-end devices. I also implemented a sprite batching system, which I had wanted to do for a while but couldn't figure out a good way to do it, but now most sprites will be able to render with a single draw call. Speaking of RGFW, the windowing trickles for my Mac support video were completely erased thanks to Diarrhea McGee lending the first and only pull request to my engine, of which I realized that all I had to do was #define RGFW export, and I could have avoided literally weeks of pain. Colleague Riley, the creator of RGFW, insulted my bitset code pretty hard. At ZDev, bitset looks pretty cringe based on the code you showed in the video. Why is it using bitset variable type for the index, and why is it divided by 64? This seems to assume 64 bits, which is pretty weird. I don't actually understand what this is doing at all, but this seems like the worst way to do it. Which is very fair, because it seemed like a good idea at the time. This led me to totally revamp it with the help of Stack Overflow to be faster, more readable, and more functional. This was after I revamped keyboard.hpp to use more of RGFW's features to make it run faster. This led me to revamp collision.hpp, making it actually usable, more readable, and straight up actually useful. Speaking of RGFW more, I was getting very hopeful for RGFW 1.9 as I could focus on other parts of the engine while my windowing API got more stable, featureful, and faster. Sadly, these dreams were crushed when colleague Riley announced that he was going to skip 1.9 and go directly to 2.0 and switch to Simper. This means he was planning on breaking changes, and I was going to have to deal with it. I tried to salvage this situation by recommending my own version handling system. I found a solution to version numbering. I worked on my head for months straight. Simper already exists. Good. No, my way is better. No, yes, but let's hear it. Okay, so basically you're on version 2.11.74, then you update to version 2.12.74, 3.12.74. You never lose your decimals. You know exactly how many times your recursions been updated, and how big each of the updates were. Mic drop. Simper is better. What? No. Mods fossilize this user. To be fair, Simper is pretty much seen as the standard way of viewing it. The standard way to view the Earth is round, but we all know the truth. Do we? Is that going to be in the devlog? Back to my actual engine. To run the project, you used to need a debugger, as that would give the project access to the textures, sounds, and shaders. But with a few lines of code, I'm able to copy all that next to the executable, and you can now run the project through the terminal, as well as double-clicking it in the file explorer. Oh yeah, after using RGFW for a while and looking at the source code a bunch, I had a few improvements that I wanted to make to the library, which were denied. Luckily, I was able to optimize key presses, hits, and releases by asserting _RGFW instead of checking it in an if loop and ignoring that assert. I restructured my engine to expose all the structs so you have access to all the variables inside them. I used SCD iOS Sync with Studio in order to make SCD count as fast as possible. I added zdeps.c in order to compile most of the dependencies that ZEngine uses, so the main file doesn't have to do as much work when you're constantly working on when I'm constantly working on the engine. I updated the mini audio macros, and it reduced the executable size by 200 kilobytes. I updated instance creation to make it more Mac friendly. I replaced throw as the engine throw to remove throws in debug mode. I added a stress test example so I can test the performance of my engine. I'm currently working on a system to package your projects as an app image. Hopefully that'll be out before this video drops. I'm still working on version 1.11, which is basically the version 1.0. The GitHub will be attached in the description below. Maybe the true RGFW is the friends we made along the way. Bro, I tried compiling for Wayland and got a bunch of errors. RGFW is not my friend. I thought you were going to sleep.